Cold mountain air cut through the valley in northern Iran as the first light of morning touched the jagged peaks of the Zagros Mountains. At exactly 8:00 a.m., 80 soldiers moved silently across the rocky terrain, their boots crunching against gravel and loose stone. They weren't ordinary infantry. Every one of them belonged to the U.S. Army's 75th Ranger Regiment, soldiers trained for the kind of missions most armies would never attempt. Each man carried a heavy pack filled with ammunition, specialized gear, and something far more destructive. Enough explosives to bring down sections of a mountain if used correctly. Their objective lay directly ahead. Hidden deep inside one of the massive Zagros ridges was an underground Iranian weapons facility built like a fortress beneath hundreds of meters of rock. For 3 years, shipments had quietly arrived at this remote location. Trucks moved in during the night. Containers disappeared into tunnels carved straight through the mountain. To anyone looking from the outside, it was simply another quiet valley surrounded by stone. But satellites had been watching. For the past 18 months, American intelligence analysts had tracked every vehicle, every shipment, every construction expansion. By studying the patterns, they pieced together a frightening picture. The mountain didn't just hide a bunker. It hid an arsenal. Inside were ballistic missiles capable of reaching targets hundreds of kilometers away. Thousands of heavy weapons were stacked in underground storage chambers. But there's no way that there's no balance. Command centers buried deep within the rock controlled the entire operation. Intelligence reports showed that the stockpile was still growing. The deeper analysts looked, the more dangerous the site appeared. Destroying it from the air wasn't an option. The tunnels were buried nearly 200 meters beneath the mountain. Even powerful bunker buster bombs would struggle to reach that depth. There was only one reliable solution: send soldiers inside. That decision set the entire operation into motion. Days earlier, when 80 Rangers were quietly selected and divided into 4 separate assault teams. Each team would have its own task, its own route, and its own objective inside the complex. The plan was brutally simple. Hit the facility from multiple directions at the same time, overwhelm the defenses, capture the intelligence inside, then destroy everything before reinforcements could arrive. But first, the Rangers had to reach the mountain without being detected. Earlier that morning, long before sunrise, 4 Black Hawk helicopters lifted off from a remote forward operating base. Their rotors sliced through the darkness as they climbed into the cold night sky. Inside each helicopter sat 20 Rangers, packed shoulder to shoulder, weapons resting across their laps. 2 Apache attack helicopters flew nearby as escort, their sensors scanning the terrain below for threats. The helicopters stayed low, hugging the contours of the mountains to avoid radar detection. For nearly 2 hours, they flew through narrow valleys and across rugged ridges, navigating through terrain that looked more like another planet than a battlefield. Finally, just before dawn, the aircraft descended into a narrow valley roughly 8 kilometers from the target. The moment the helicopters touched down, the Rangers jumped out and immediately moved into formation. The pilots didn't wait. Within seconds, the Black Hawks lifted off again and disappeared behind the mountains. Now the Rangers were alone. From that point forward, everything would happen on foot. Even the smallest mistake could alert the defenders inside the mountain. Up ahead, the underground complex waited with layers of defenses. Iranian forces had spent years preparing the area around the tunnels. Fighting positions were carved into the rocky slopes overlooking the approaches. Mortars were placed on elevated ground to provide overlapping fire. Minefields guarded the most obvious paths. Roughly 60 Iranian soldiers were assigned to protect the outer perimeter alone. At each tunnel entrance, additional defenders stood ready behind reinforced steel doors and concrete barriers. Heavy machine guns were positioned to sweep the approach routes. Anyone attempting to rush the entrances would be caught in a storm of gunfire. Inside the mountain, the facility was divided into 3 main tunnel systems. The northern tunnel housed a missile storage area containing approximately 150 ballistic missiles. Among them were medium-range Shahab-3 missiles and short-range tactical systems designed for battlefield use. The southern tunnel contained a massive weapons warehouse. Rows of racks held hundreds of RPG launchers, mortars of various calibers, heavy machine guns, and advanced anti-tank missile systems. Nearby, millions of rounds of ammunition were stacked in crates reaching nearly to the ceiling. The central tunnel led to the command center, where Iranian officers managed the entire facility. Computers stored detailed records of every weapon stored inside, including delivery routes, inventory counts, and future deployment plans. From the perspective of the facility commander, the base was secure. The mountain itself acted as the ultimate shield, but mountains also have weaknesses. American planners had identified several. The defenders were isolated. Reinforcements couldn't reach them quickly through the rugged terrain. The entrances to the tunnels acted as choke points. Once those were breached, the defenders inside would have limited room to maneuver. And if explosives collapsed the tunnels, everything inside would be buried permanently. The Rangers continued moving across the terrain, closing the distance meter by meter. Alpha Team headed toward the northern missile tunnel. Bravo Team moved toward the southern weapons storage entrance. Charlie Team advanced toward the central command tunnel. Delta Team took a different role. Their mission was to eliminate the outer defensive positions and prevent any Iranian forces from interfering with the main assault. Large boulders and rock formations provided natural cover overlooking the facility entrances. Through rifle scopes, the Rangers could see the Iranian defenders clearly. Some soldiers walked slow patrol routes. Others sat in fortified positions, scanning the valley below. None of them realized how close the Rangers had already come. The assault was scheduled to begin at exactly 8:15 a.m. As the time approached, the Rangers checked their weapons and waited. Then, right on schedule, 2 Apache helicopters suddenly appeared above the ridgeline. The quiet valley exploded into chaos. The Apaches fired rockets and unleashed streams of 30mm cannon fire toward the Iranian defensive positions. Explosions erupted across the mountainside as mortar emplacements and fighting positions were destroyed within seconds. Before the defenders could react, Delta Team opened fire from the slopes. Their rifles cracked sharply across the valley. Caught between helicopter fire from above and accurate rifle fire from hidden Rangers below, the Iranian soldiers found themselves trapped in a deadly crossfire. Some tried to return fire, others ran for cover. But the attack was too sudden and too coordinated. Within minutes, the outer defensive network began collapsing. Mortar teams were eliminated, machine gun positions were destroyed, soldiers scattered across the rocky slopes attempting to survive. Delta Team advanced methodically, maintaining pressure on the defenders while securing the perimeter. Meanwhile, the 3 assault teams sprinted toward the tunnel entrances. The defenders there had already slammed shut the heavy steel blast doors protecting the tunnels. Machine guns fired through small reinforced firing ports in the concrete walls, sending streams of bullets across the round. Alpha Team reached the northern tunnel first. 2 Rangers stepped forward carrying AT-4 rocket launchers while the rest of the team provided covering fire. As bullets slammed into rocks around them, the 2 soldiers aimed at the steel door. Both rockets fired at the same time. The impact blasted the door off its hinges in a violent explosion that echoed through the valley. Before the smoke even cleared, flashbang grenades flew through the entrance. The deafening blasts inside stunned the defenders. Alpha Team rushed forward immediately. Inside the tunnel entrance chamber, close quarters combat erupted. The confined space amplified every gunshot. In less than 5 minutes, the defenders were eliminated and the entrance secured. Bravo Team struck the southern tunnel moments later using the same tactic. Their AT-4 rockets shattered the reinforced door and flashbang grenades disoriented the defenders inside. But the fighting here was tougher. 2 rockets and several fragmentation grenades were used to break the defense. When Charlie Team stormed inside, they encountered a larger entrance complex with branching corridors and multiple rooms. Clearing it took longer. But eventually the Rangers secured the command tunnel as well. By 8:45 a.m., all 3 entrances were under Ranger control. Now came the most dangerous phase, the tunnels themselves. Each tunnel stretched deep into the mountain, lit by overhead electrical lighting and lined with concrete walls. Alpha Team moved into the northern tunnel in tactical formation, weapons raised, advancing slowly toward the missile chamber. 50 meters in, the first resistance appeared. Iranian soldiers had barricaded themselves behind equipment crates and opened fire. Gunshots thundered through the tunnel. The Rangers responded immediately, using grenades and coordinated movement to force the defenders back. Meter by meter, they pushed forward. At 9:15 a.m., Alpha Team reached the missile storage cavern. The tunnel opened into a massive chamber filled with ballistic missiles standing on transport cradles. 10 defenders made a final stand but were quickly overwhelmed. As the Rangers secured the chamber, demolition specialists began placing C4 explosive charges designed to collapse the cavern roof. Meanwhile, Bravo Team continued fighting their way through the southern tunnel toward the weapons storage area. The resistance here was fierce. Several defensive positions slowed their progress, forcing them into brutal close-quarters battles. Finally, at 9:30 a.m., Bravo Team entered the enormous weapons warehouse. Rows of RPG launchers, mortars, heavy machine guns, anti-tank missiles, and mountains of ammunition filled the cavern. The scale of the arsenal stunned even the experienced Rangers. After clearing the remaining defenders, demolition teams began placing thermite charges across the storage racks. Once ignited, the thermite would burn hot enough to melt metal weapons beyond recovery. Charlie Team pushed through the central tunnel toward the command center. When they burst inside, dozens of Iranian officers were gathered around computer systems and communications equipment. Seeing the Rangers surrounding them, the officers surrendered. Within minutes, intelligence specialists began copying data from the computers. The information inside revealed shipment schedules, inventory lists, and supply networks. The intelligence alone made the mission worthwhile. By 10:15, the Rangers had withdrawn from the mountain. Now it was time to erase it. Explosive charges were set throughout the tunnels. At 10:15, the Rangers began withdrawing from the mountain. By 10:30, all 80 soldiers were outside the facility at a safe distance. At 10:40, the demolition command was given. The mountain erupted. Massive explosions collapsed the missile chamber first, burying the ballistic missiles beneath tons of rock. Moments later, thermite charges ignited inside the weapons warehouse. The intense heat triggered thousands of secondary explosions. As ammunition cooked off, the mountain shook as fire and molten metal consumed the arsenal. Within minutes, the tunnels collapsed completely. 3 years of construction destroyed in less than 4 hours. By 10:50, the Rangers boarded the returning helicopters. 80 soldiers lifted off from the valley. Behind them, smoke poured from the shattered mountain as the underground facility vanished beneath rubble forever.